What? A child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Story do you have? A kid who was relentlessly bullied at my school for years sued the district and got an upper six-figure settlement. BRB. Filing a lawsuit. I mean, that's the short version of how it went down. He had years of documentation of going to the principal, teachers, counselors, even the superintendent. They all either did nothing or made empty promises that they didn't keep. He had documentation for it all. The highlight was when the lacrosse team jammed a lacrosse stick up his butt not once, but twice, and the only consequence was one of the kids being suspended for 2 days. Edit. I should also add that this isn't a rural school in the deep south. It's a suburban school located in a liberal part of New York. Edit 2. No. This did not happen on Long Island. I'm sad to hear that these stories are more common than I thought. But twice? Someone I used to have in a support group I once helped run for Sully victimized and young men shared with us what happened to him. I'm not going into the finer details of it, but the broad stroke is he was being victimized by a TA. He went to other teachers, school admins, and even police. No one believed him, and he even got punished for making it up to get a staff member in trouble. It destroyed his personality. He became bitter, resentful, spiteful, and generally dislikeful of other people. He was improving his demeanor in the group, but from what he tells us, he just wanted to watch the world die at the time. A couple years later, that same TA tripped down the stairwell in one of the side hallways of the school, and he happened to be nearby. He saw she was badly injured and likely had broken bones and was bleeding from her head. Instead of helping her, he literally stepped over her and pretended she wasn't there. Security footage showed he wasn't the one to push her, but when asked why he didn't say anything or get help, he simply said that last time he tried to tell people about something involving her, no one helped, so why would they this time? I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. An old saying goes, I forgive you, but when you will be in a time of need, I will never help. A guy who f'd me over previously needed some parts for his project dissertation show. Parts only I had. I didn't bother answering his 19 calls. Sorry guy, I'm busy, not helping you. One of my friends from elementary school. He's the typical middle child. His brother is 11 years older and his sister is 5 years younger. So of course he faces all the actual consequences for his other siblings' actions. Rules he didn't like were because of stuff his brother did when his brother was a kid. If his sister did something stupid, it was his fault because he should have stopped her. His wants and needs were never the priority. If he wanted money, no, because it went to his brother in college. If he wanted friends to come over, no, because sister already had people coming over. He had to wear his brother's old clothes. But of course his sister got new clothes. Yada yada, you get the picture. When he was 16, he went out on a late night food run. And while waiting in the drive-thru, someone rear-ends him pretty hard. Does a not insignificant amount of damage to his parents' car. The other driver takes full responsibility. Offers to pay for the repairs. Just an unfortunate accident. Well, his parents revoke his car privileges. Because he got in an accident. And they had a no accidents policy, didn't matter, then it wasn't his fault. So he told them that if they took away his car privileges, he will never lend them anything for the rest of his life. They grounded him for saying that. That was about a decade ago. And he has never once given them anything. No money. No car, not even housing. He literally made his parents get a hotel once. He said he would forgive them if they apologized. To my knowledge, they have not apologized. By the way, his sister was involved in an accident a few years back where she was at fault. And her parents not only paid for the repairs to her car, but also are helping her pay for her car insurance now. I'm imagining him getting in a horrible car accident where he is not at fault. He sustains life-threatening injuries. He is put in a medically induced coma and his parents rushed to the hospital for the single purpose of informing him he is grounded. Poor guy is the real-life Butters. Grounded for having a stupid face. Lou. I met this kid while in junior high. Knew him his first year in high school. Back in 7879. Remember the movie Carrie? He had that for a mother. He was super religious and had to pray multiple times a day. Carried a large Bible with his school books, wore old-fashioned formal clothes, 1950s style haircut, and horned rim glasses. His mother punished him because she saw us talking when he got off the school bus. I guess I didn't pass the friend standard. He was so unsocialized and awkward. He was grateful to speak with anyone, and I didn't make fun of him. I guess it got to be too much. He didn't come back to school for the sophomore year. I later learned that while his mother was sleeping, he doused her with gasoline and set her and the bed on fire. She lived. And they just disappeared. I never heard of him again. How in the heck did she not die? It's an awkward moment when the bouncers in both heaven and heck turn you away. Sounds like the two parties compromised by making her life a living heck as a burn victim. Dude, her 2-sentence horror would love this. Guess her mom didn't pass the parent standard. I was lied to by HR, and it led to me not getting a promotion. I basically put them in a position where I couldn't be replaced and messed with the Excel codes I made for them that saved managers 6 hours a day. I didn't correct what I knew would get us high fees since it wasn't technically my job. Then I quit. $700K in fines. Nobody trained to do scheduling. Department without anyone to run it. And additional work for the managers was the damage. I started getting calls to help them fix it. I'm sure you can imagine how well that went for them. Edit. To everyone complaining about my actions here. This was years ago. The Excel document automation wasn't something I was asked to do. I did it because having the manager free made everyone else's job easier. The document literally needed to be made once a month in order to keep functioning. On top of that, this isn't some mom and pop shop that got hit with this. This was a multi-million-dollar company. I was doing work above my pay grade, and outside of the scope of my job. I just stopped doing the extra. Don't F with the only person in the office who practices the black arts of Excel formulae and macros. It will only end badly. They tried to copy and paste the table. Ha ha ha. Those sweet summer children. I recently turned someone's multi-day reoccurring task into a 5-minute one, and gave him strict instructions not to touch anything other than adding data to the cells I had highlighted. Got a call a few days later with him in a full panic. I think he did a normal paste instead of paste values. A solid hour of making him watch via Teams while I fixed it left him very much convinced that he has to follow my instructions to the letter. Haven't had a problem since. One of my friends in high school was a major overachiever. Stayed at school or work as much as possible, to the point where he may have spent an hour or less at home a day. He would always deflect questions about his home life, but confided in me that it was bad. Calling him the black sheep of the family would be a major understatement. His family had some money, not millionaire or billionaire but better off than most, and they told him from elementary school he would always be useless and never amount to anything. He is making bank after getting through college and finding a B job with a big pharmaceutical company. Meanwhile his father's company, that has been in the family for a few generations, got picked apart by the government. Someone tipped them off that he was lying on taxes, hiring immigrants for next to nothing, hiding OSHA violations, and much more. As the dust was settling and the damage was really being seen, my buddy drove to his former family home and dropped off a file. The same file he gave an attorney that gave it to the government, and only said, "Who won't amount to anything." Stone cold and absolutely ruthless. If you want to see a man achieve some seriously good personal life gimme a heck yeah. There was that nuclear revenge post about a guy ostracized by the entire town. I think cause he was born out of wedlock, and after getting out of there became an inspector of some kind. Eventually he was given a list of factories that needed reviewing and one needed to close. The factory in his hometown was on the list. He goes there, inspects, they act all buddy-buddy thinking they're safe from closure. Boy were 3 wrong. Every infraction, breach of safety, incorrect anything went into his report. The whole town basically was built around that factory, and when it shut down the town was desolate and dead within a few years. I know the exact one you're talking about. Popped into my head the moment I read the prompt. Link? Enjoy the read. I need a link to read this because that sounds amazing. A guy I went to high school with burned the bridge with his entire family. We weren't best friends, more of a friend type of situation. So my info is a lot of hearsay, but I do know some things for certain. He was the middle child, with an older sister and a younger brother. His parents had owned a diner and it had been in his family for a few generations. It was an unspoken rule that the kids of each generation would help out when they were little, and eventually take it over to keep it in the family. The problem was none of them wanted anything to do with it. It was the easiest way to set him off. Even mentioning it would have him go from 0100 real quick. This didn't stop either of his parents though. They would joke about how the kids didn't need to worry about college, or moving away. All of that would be taken care of when they would run the diner. The sister, being the oldest, was the first really pressured into it. But he and his brother told her to get out and don't look back, and don't let them guilt trip you. So she did, and goes to college on a sports scholarship and then moves a few states away. She occasionally visits but more or less left the town in her rearview mirror. Then it was his turn. But unfortunately he didn't have the money to get away. So his parents tell him to go to community college and work at the diner to save money. This is where the issues started. The younger brother doesn't go to college, and decides to go couch surfing and backpacking across the country for a few years, occasionally coming back to work for a few weeks when he needed the money, only to take off again. So my friend gets left running the place, despite swearing he never would. I'd see him around sometimes at bars, and he was a bitter sheck of his former self with a bad drinking problem and a series of failed relationships. His parents didn't seem to care that their son was a depressed alcoholic, so long as their family legacy stayed the same. He confided in me how they were pushing him to get married and give them grandkids, to settle down and let go of this silly dream of starting over when he has the diner, which, given how SH-faced he was in nearly every interaction I had with him, It's impressive he was able to run it. His sister and brother couldn't be bothered to come down and help. And in fact they started to agree with the parents that he should just cut his losses and make this life work for him. One day, he drops off the face of the earth. Nobody sees or hears from him for 3 weeks. His parents say he went on a vacation. And they also hadn't heard from him. Then suddenly he's back in town. Seemingly in much better spirits. Looking healthier than we had seen him in years. About 2 months later the diner is torn down and replaced with some other business. As it turns out, his girlfriend at the time gave him an ultimatum. Quit the drinking and go to therapy or we're done. So he does. And the therapist points out the obvious things linking his depression and says he should take a vacation and figure out what else he wants to do with his life. He went to Vegas, partied for 2 weeks and admittedly thought about King himself. After getting it out of his system, he devises a plan to sell the diner and pocket the money for himself. Everything was in his name as the owner anyway. So it was pretty easy. He took the best offer he could. And used that money to leave town. The brother and sister didn't get a dime. And the parents were already retired. He moved to the other side of the country with his now wife. And we follow each other on social media but he seems much happier. Apparently he hasn't spoken a word to his family in years. Nor they to him. And does not intend to start. I'll be very honest. I thought this was gonna end with him committing some criminal act. Glad things worked out for him. Given the theme of the thread I was thinking arson. Especially when he returned from vacation in much better spirits. OSH. He's devised a plan to torch the place. And he will follow through. To settle down and let go of this silly dream of starting over when he has the diner. Which, given how SH-faced he was in nearly every interaction I had with him. It's impressive he was able to run it. His sister and brother couldn't be bothered to come down and help. And in fact they started to agree with the parents that he should just cut his losses and make this life work for him. This is like a prequel to It's a Wonderful Life. That effing movie. Partied for 2 weeks and admittedly thought about King himself. After getting it out of his system, he devises a plan to sell the diner and pocket the money for himself. Everything was in his name as the owner anyway. So it was pretty easy. He took the best offer he could. And used that money to leave town. And this is the better ending than the movie had. People's livelihoods depended on their little bank. Many owned their own homes because of it. George stepping up wasn't about fulfilling the expectations of his father. Heck, his father wanted him to travel. It was about saving a town that loved him and that he, with some perspective, realized that he loved too. Jim. Not his real name. Of course. Anyway, Jim moved to my school in 5th grade. He was socially awkward but you could tell that he wanted to have friends. But for some reason, he was a complete social pariah. Was it because of his weight? I honestly don't know. It's not like he was the only big boy in the school. But for some reason, Jim got singled out. He was tormented mercilessly. I'll give Jim credit. He took it. But how could that not get to him? Still, he took it. For years. Finally, one kid went too far. In the 8th grade, some $1 accidentally spilled his lunch all over Jim. Jim was sitting by himself. Of course. And Randy thought it would be funny to humiliate Jim in the cafeteria. That particular day, the school had served something messy like chicken fried steak or spaghetti or something like that for lunch. Something that gets everywhere if you spill it. And spill it. Randy did. All over Jim. And Jim snapped. I mentioned that Jim was heavy. What that translated to, apparently, was immense physical strength. Nobody had been paying attention all those times in PE when Jim would climb the little rope thing without using his legs to pull himself up. But he was a powerhouse. And Randy poked the bear one time too many. Randy's face was a mess of blood and bruises. Jim gave Randy exactly as much mercy as everyone had given him. Which is to say, absolutely zero. Randy's parents filed a lawsuit against the school district. But I have no idea what came out of that. All I know is that Jim and Randy were never seen at the school again. The teachers and principals all understood what Jim was up against. There's no way they didn't know how miserable he was. But school is a lot like prison. The people in authority don't actually care what happens to you. All they want is for your SH to stay off of them. As long as you don't make your problems their problems, they're fine with dislike for. So, Jim was left to twist in the wind. As victims always are. A few years after graduation, Jim was in the news. He had robbed a convenience store and then gotten shot to death by the cops. The news coverage mentioned a troubled childhood filled with violence. But I was around for a good bit of his childhood. And on my watch, except for one occasion, the trouble and violence were completely one side. Jim couldn't get a fair deal even in death. Even the news media had to pile on. Edit. Thank you for the gold. This reads like a Stephen King short story. You are a very good writer. Poor Jim. Edit. Spelled his name wrong. BCM dumb. Lamau. I saw the edit and was like, how do you misspell Jim? Jim. As a kid who was beaten for years by mother and stepfather, and dad knew this but wouldn't help me in the slightest way and treated me horribly. I can honestly say that as the kid who would take care of an ailing parent, I will now, as an adult, Tell that now ailing parent that they are on their own to fend for himself. Me 100x over. My dad recently made a crack against my younger sister when she volunteered to care for him in old age. He mocked her and tore her down, then basically said I was the only one cut out for it, and my response was, that sucks because you're not moving in with me and I'm not paying for anything. Better go back to little sister and ask her to reconsider. He did and she didn't. He has now been preemptively abandoned by all 3 of his daughters. Here's hoping my brothers got him, cause I sure as F don't. Here's hoping they don't. He can live with the consequences of his actions. Unfortunately, the girls got it bad so the boys could get it good. He earned a spot with them, just not with us. Thankfully, none of us siblings resent each other. When working at a daycare, I had a pair of boys in my class. Matt and John, fake names, of course. Full offense. John was trash. He was violent, tie, foul-mouthed, uncooperative, and frankly, just not cut out for daycare. Kid was a budding psychopath. He never acted like this around anyone but me. He was a huge favorite among the staff that didn't work with him, so much so that they thought I lied about or exaggerated his behavior until the day he stabbed me. Now the other one. My burn the village boy. God. He was the one everyone said was misbehaved. But like John, his behavior with me was completely different. I treated Matt the way I treated all my kids. I found him to be cheerful, helpful with younger kids, bright and eager to learn new things. I considered the fact that I was the first teacher to engage with Matt in a positive way and also the first to ever tell John no and enforce rules with him. Shortly after I stopped working there, I heard from a former coworker that there had been an incident. Apparently, everything went back to the status quo where everyone spoils John and acts like he's perfect while treating Matt like he had already done something. There was a massive blow up between him and John in particular, and from I heard, Matt basically hulked out and trashed the place. My heart broke for him. He just wanted attention and structure and absolutely thrived with it. John needed discipline and structure of a different kind, but instead was coddled and enabled. The results were inevitable. I'm just sad it resulted in Matt getting kicked out. I hope he landed at a new school with teachers who actually cared about him. That entire center was a mess of bullshit like that. Favoritism, tie staff behavior, attitudes, etc. Stabbed you? With a spork of all things, but hard enough that it stuck in my arm the whole way home that day. And the kid didn't get disciplined? WTH? Growing up, our neighbors had a couple boys, 10 and 14 plus at the time of this story. The younger son had a good friend that would stay at their house very frequently. He was always pretty quiet and kept to himself, except when he was with his friend, the 10-yo, which was when he could be himself. One day we find out that he was permanently moving in with my neighbors due to an unsafe situation at home. Apparently this poor kid got to watch his mother be murdered by her boyfriend. All because right in front of him, the 10-year-old. Luckily my neighbors stepped up and offered to take him in, which was actually great for everyone. He really started to blossom and became pretty stable. With a caveat, he just didn't take any SH from anyone. Which leads us to our terrific act of rebellion. Like everyone else in our neighborhood, we rode the bus home. This kid is riding home from elementary school when the bus driver started going off on the kids for real, or imagined indiscretions. Well, this kid takes offense to this and speaks up on behalf of the rest of the kids. Bus driver, now royally pissed, angry, for our nanas crowd, tells this kid one more word and I'm kicking you off the bus. Well, you are correct in your assumption of what transpired next. Kid gets kicked off the bus, which royally pisses him off. So QMC. Kid walks off the bus, and immediately walks in front of the bus. We were about a mile from his normal stop at our street, and this was a 2-lane road with sporadic oncoming traffic. No way the driver could get away with trying to pass. So he drove at a walking pace until the kid got to our street. Parents were wondering where their children were, as everyone was now 30+ minutes late, and were overall very amused when they discovered the cause. Still about the most proud of a 10-year-old I've ever been. And I have 2 of my own. Anyway, I gotta look that guy up. Hope he's well. That is hilarious and the perfect MC. I hope he is having an awesome life. What's MC? From anyone, this is badass. But I can't help but think this comes from watching his mother die and feeling like he should have stopped it. Poor kid. I'd have to agree with the theory. Really F'd up all around. Like he grew up way too fast. At least he had a moment like that instead of modeling the violence he was exposed to. Plus, it was hilarious. Still. For 53 years, my father gaslit me and always made me feel like one day he would be a real father. Well, he's in his 80s and has Parkinson's and is married to a terrible woman, and I no longer help him or my stepmother in their old age because they are such terrible people. Now, they have to find other people to give them rides, to lift things, to listen to doctors, etc. Oh, I also informed my stepmother that the day my father dies and while she is picking out a casket, I will march into the IRS to report her for committing tax fraud with my father. There is no statute of limitations and I want her to sweat every time she hears him cough, sneeze, or moan. F them. I will march into the IRS to report her for committing tax fraud with my father. There is no statute of limitations and I want her to sweat every time she hears him cough, sneeze, or moan. That's the most creative village burning I've seen from this thread. Brutal. Thank you. Just remember, you can't hurt anybody more than their own imagination can. You can use it in war, you can use it in business negotiation, and you can use it for artistic purposes like Hitchcock in Psycho. This whole comment is brilliant but holy sh. This is powerful and I will definitely carry it with me going forward.